Alright guys, welcome back to part 2 on how to build a 600-yard hunting rifle for $600. This is based on what's available in Canada and Canadian currency, but it would be very similar to the cost you'd be looking at for like a Remington 783 or Savage Axis down in the States. For the purposes of brevity, I'm going to tell you what I've done to the rifle and give you a quick overview, but if you're looking for in-depth instructions on how to bed them or free float them, etc., there's already a lot of great videos out there on the internet. So I'm just going to try to keep this short and sweet and show you how to get what you've got to where it needs to be. First thing I want to do is get some ammo out, get a baseline off this rifle. That'll give us a point of comparison when we're done, and it'll also ensure that we have a fully functional rifle before we spend a lot of time with it. One of the first things I like to check with a second-hand firearm is to make sure that the barrel itself's in good condition. I do this simply by putting a light in the action and looking down the muzzle to make sure the rifling's still sharp and there's no gouges or anything in there that's not supposed to be in there. The other way I check it is I'll take a cartridge and I'll insert it into the muzzle, and it should stop well before it gets to the case neck. To inspect the bolt, I do a visual inspection of the bolt face to make sure it's not cratering, and I actually go over it and make sure all the parts that are supposed to be on the bolt are actually there. With the triggers, I do a visual inspection, make sure it doesn't look like anybody's been messing around with it. I have a Timney in this one, and it looks like it's in pretty good shape. What I will do with any of them is with an unloaded rifle, I'll cock it and I will strike the butt of the stock on the ground several times to ensure it's drop safe. Now that we know we have a good rifle, we're going to get this thing bedded. And we're going to bed it in the front around the recoil lug, and in the rear around the rear receiver screw. Now before we mix up the bedding compound, we're going to scrape any junk off of this, and we're going to fill any holes or areas we don't want bedding compound getting into with plasticine or paper towel. We're going to add a release agent to the receiver. In this case, I'm just using WD-40. Now they make actual bedding compounds, but I've got cold weld lying around, so we're going to use it. Once you get your bedding compound mixed up, just come through with a small tool like an Allen key and clean out your screw holes before you put the action back into your receiver. To free float your barrel, just pop the action out, take some 220 grit sandpaper, and just work that barrel channel on your receiver until you can get a piece of paper to slide up without snagging. Now there's various different ways to mount and level your scopes. You can buy these bubble level kits starting at about $20, and they run up to I think like $150 for the fancy kits. But I generally don't use the bubble levels, and I'm going to show you how I do it 90% of the time. So what I do to start is I get the scope mounted in the rings and make sure I've got enough clearance for my bolt throw. I could have gone a bit lower with the rings on this one, but I had the rings already, so it's what I'm using. From there, I'm going to mount the rifle in the position that I'm going to be shooting it from most of the time. In this case, it'll be prone, and I can set my eye relief up by moving the scope forward and backwards. Then I can build the comb of the rifle up until I have a clear view through the scope without any shadowing anywhere in my field of view. Once I'm happy with my setup, I'll transfer that scope to a one-piece rail, and I'll put a straight edge in between the Picatinny rail and the flat bottom base of the scope. When I apply torsion to the straight edge, it will self-level the scope to the scope rail. Then all I gotta do is tighten up my scope ring screws with a little bit of blue Loctite and transfer it back to the other rifle. Now that we have this thing put together, we've got to get it coated to protect it from the elements. I'm a big fan of urethane-based paints for hunting rifles. That's stuff like Krylon Fusion. It's really chip resistant for what it is, and it'll adhere to metal, plastic, wood, pretty much anything on a rifle. You just have to remember it'll take 7 days for it to come to a full cure. Now that all the work's out of the way, it's time to hit up the range. We'll verify our ammo and see what type of groups it prints. Till next time.